Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We're going to start our meeting. You want to have roll call, Trina?
Mayor Parker?
Here?
Mr. Jacobs?
Here.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Here.
Ms. Christie?
Here.
Mr. Rodelius?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. D?
Here.
Mr. Zupnik?
Here.
Ms. Patras?
Here.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burnersville News Burnersville, the Courier News Somerville, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 9th, 2017.
Please stand for the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to ask if there's anyone from the public that is here for any other reason other than what's on the agenda. Now would be the time to speak up. Seeing none, we'll move on. We are going to go out of order slightly. We're going to take our business first, and then we'll come back to our speaker. I guess, Paul, we're right where you want to be, right?
I wanted to update the board relative to the status of the pending applications because we have a couple on the agenda for next week. The first is the EDC Edwards application. You've seen that before. It's up for a public hearing next week. 1120 Lamington Road, they have resubmitted. I've yet to review that. That will not be on next week. We're looking down the road for that. Probably October for a hearing on that. I've got to get to the plans and then I will make a recommendation on that next week. As far as Board of Adjustment pending applications, and we have the Bedminster 2 Funding LLC, and that's effectively on hold at this point until we get revised documentation in. Lamington Road LLC has been adjourned until next week. We talked about potentially dismissing that without prejudice, but I think we have to deal with that next week as well. Crossroads Business Center, that's on the application. I don't know if it's set in.
No, you have that on for completeness tonight. I have it.
Can I have my limit?
Yeah.
I did get back to my office, and I apologize for that. This is for modifications to the parking lot, and it's most of the information has been submitted on the plan. They have requested a number of waivers that I think are appropriate, and in my opinion, it can be deemed complete, subject to two items being submitted, and that is the Historic Preservation Commission certificate of appropriateness and a copy of the digital plan. If we get that 15 days before the meeting, they can be heard. I would suggest maybe that they be scheduled for the second meeting in October. We can do that.
Okay.
So if the board would entertain, that would be a motion to deem the application complete and waive the remaining items for completeness, provided they're filed in accordance with what Mr. Ferraro just explained. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Aye.
Ms. Christie?
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Ms. Patras?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye.
The Raritan Family Health Care application is a new application that's in. It's for reuse of the old Hurley Insurance Building on Main Street. And it's relatively minor site work associated with the refitting of the building. It's sort of only a change in tenancy, but because it's going to a healthcare use, you need to do some parking lot improvements, and based on some of the scheduling issues that the applicant has, I suggest that it be on for completeness and hearing next week. As I said, it's a relative application. I'm in the midst of doing the report right now, and you'll have that for next week. I can tell you that while I would not have you make a formal completeness determination tonight, it will be complete, and you'll be able to deal with it next week.
Okay. And they know to do notice?
Yes, they have provided a notice.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I forgot to mention, and I'm sorry, that this is also an open public meeting of the Administrative Township Committee, and notice of the meeting was given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by the Township Clerk. They don't have any business other than the business we're doing with the Planning Board, but if the majority is present, then it is a meeting of the committee.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we can go on and have our speaker from the county. Planning Board. I just want to say thank you to Larry for arranging this, whatever you initiated.
Well, it was initiated by Walter and County, and Walter will probably run through a brief synopsis of actually how this came around, and then he approached the township on moving forward
Sure.
with the study, and the mayor and I had a few meetings with Walter and the experts from Parsons on the planning studies.
I don't know if we have enough, ready? I think we have enough here.
I'll let say my presentation.
Which one? Everybody got one? Okay.
So thank you for having me tonight. It's been a pleasure working with the township on this project. So as an introduction, I'm Walt Lane. I'm the Director of Planning for Somerset County. I've been there almost 19 years now, 3 years as Director. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on how we started the Supporting Priority Investment in Somerset County initiative. But I need to tell a little bit of a backstory of how we got there. So the county's been a big supporter of regional planning and trying to guide land use decisions in the county. As you know, the county does not have land use, however, that's at the local level. So back in 1987, as part of our master plan, we had a land use management should occur. This is coordinated with the state development redevelopment plan, which was adopted, and the county has been a strong supporter of that over the many years, going through cross-acceptance, working with all 21 of our towns to cross-accept the state plan, which is laid out goals for where development should occur, where investment should occur, where the state should spend money. And we tried to align where the county should spend money and hopefully align local investments as well to guide growth and preservation activities. So building upon that, in 2014, we adopted the county investment framework, which is a much more detailed, as you can see from the old map. And this was developed working one-on-one with each of our 21 communities to identify where growth should occur, where preservation should occur. Colors are hard to see, but the purplish colors are the priority growth investment areas. Those are areas where the land use policies and infrastructure exist, power, water, sewer, transportation, mass transit, and whether the desire for growth and we should occur. Those are the old planning area ones from the state development redevelopment plan.
Mr. Lane, I'm sorry, can I ask you to use the handheld mic just so I make sure we're getting everything on the audio?
Sure, sorry about that. Let me start all over. So the priority growth investment areas are where investment should occur, economic development activity occur, consistent with local plans or desires for investment in those areas. It's hard to see with the colors on the map, but the whitish areas on the map are the alternative growth areas. That's basically the planning areas 2 in the old state plan, and where there's public water and sewer, but those are mostly the residential areas of the county. The brownish colors are local priority areas, and those are places like Watchung Village Center, the Kingston Hamlet, Stoneboro, those types of places, Far Hills, where there's a desire on the local level for investment, but nothing that would change the scale or character of those places. The prior growth investment areas, I should step back, those range in places from like the Somerset County Regional Center, which is Somerville, Raritan, and portions of Bridgewater Township, to the I-287 industrial area in Franklin Township, the Route 22 corridor in Greenbrook and Watchung and Branchburg, Mount Bethel Road corridor in Warren, those types of places, and the AT&T campus in Bedminster. And all these places were designated working along with each of our communities. So the map is consensus. None of these areas designate this without local support or local buy-in. So it wasn't the county dictating these designations. It was based on data, a lot of GIS data, and local plans and local input. So if an area met the criteria for being, let's say, a priority growth investment area, but the community did not want that, it's not mapped that way. So this is really a consensus vision for growth and preservation should occur in the county. The greens, the dark greens are permanently preserved lands, either from the state, county, federal, or local level. They could be preserved farms, they could be preserved open space. And the lighter green is the priority preservation investment area, and that's where preservation is encouraged or desired in those areas. So almost that's more than half the county is shown in the preservation area. Doesn't mean all those areas will eventually be preserved, but it's very low intensity in development, stewardship, environmental stewardship, those types of concepts that would apply to those lands. So in order for this effort to forward, these are kind of some of the goals of the framework. It's really a tactical alignment of land use and infrastructure decisions and preservation plans, resources, programs to make sure everyone's kind of moving in the same direction and not doing anything to the detriment of another agency or community. Basically conveying a clear investment message to the private sector where growth is desired and where growth is not, and just basically promote our ongoing smart growth strategies, preservation plans that the county has long-standing policies with. So just some of the advantages of this, it was a way of implementing the state plan policy map, builds upon our history of smart growth planning in the county at the state, county, and local levels, and it was grounded in a lot of GIS data that went into this. So actually this map is actually to the parcel level, so it's based on parcel lines, so it's very specific. It's not the blob map that was first done in 1987. It's very specific on where those places were grow and not grow. So this is the map again. You get a little bit better here. So those are the different areas. The limited growth investment areas are basically areas that do not have public water or sewer or very low scale development. I think I touched on all the other ones there. So in order to move this forward, there's a couple projects that we've been working on. First was the county's comprehensive economic development strategy. That was funded by the United States Department of Economic Development, and it's really a guide for where private sector investment should, what the private sector would like to see for programs and initiatives to support economic growth, job retention, expansion, private sector investment. So that really gives the investment framework the business side of where growth should occur, and those are coordinated. So it's giving the geographic framework for many of the policies of the comprehensive economic development strategy. We did another study supporting private investment through access and mobility improvements. That study looked at redevelopment sites throughout the county where transportation improvements and some land use changes could spur reuse or redevelopment of those parcels. So one of them that we looked at was the Santa Fe campus in Bridgewater, and we recommended a series of potential improvements to that area for transportation, as well as a couple different land use scenarios for the eventual reuse of that site, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then we did supporting priority investment phase 1 through 3, to move the investment framework from a planning document, trying to make it a real plan, as something that's being implemented and advanced, and hopefully bringing additional resources to the county and to our communities. In phase 1 of supporting priority investment, we really realized that we needed to have real data, so the plan wasn't a pie in the sky vision or aspiration. We wanted to have real data to make better informed decisions on what the market really could bear, what the vacancy rates are, where the job creation, the different sectors where there's going to be job growth, where there would be decline, so we can make realistic decisions and realistic planning recommendations based on real data. So I won't go through all that, but you can see we looked at a lot of different factors. This report is on our website. It's 500 pages of anything you would ever want to know about the 24 priority growth investment areas. We used that to support phase 2 and phase 3, and we updated that as the studies went on and refreshed it to make sure we had real data, so we weren't making planning recommendations that didn't have a basis for actually moving forward. So this is really a community-based planning process. There was a lot of outreach. We did a lot of focus groups with different sectors. We worked with the real estate community, nonprofits, ranging from groups like RideWatch, which is the transportation management agency that promotes alternative mobility strategies, biking and walking and carpooling. We met with a series of environmental groups. We met with, I said, various real estate professionals, commercial real estate brokers, trying to get an idea where they saw the market going and what there was the demand for different types of uses were. We worked with our engineering staff, and then we worked with our municipal partners. For any of the sites that we selected, we met with them at least 3 times, sometimes 4 or 5, to make sure we were making recommendations that the towns were comfortable with, based in the reality of the market data. We had several public meetings during the process. So the methodology was, like I said, really market-based. So these were realistic. They're basically saying just rezone it and have Google come in or Amazon come in. That could be in the plan, but that's really not going to happen. So we looked at incremental changes and transformational changes. We tried to make sure that we had some short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations. So it's really an actionable plan. And then we came up with framework plans, and you can see the different types of recommendations that we made. And we kind of expanded it in phase 3, looking at green infrastructure, looking at LEED and green building design type of recommendations, looking at sustainability and resiliency issues, as well as the typical land use and parking. And we developed NJDOT problem statements, which is basically the entree into getting state funding for various transportation improvements that were either state facilities or federal facilities that were managed by them. So that brings additional federal or state money to help the project advance. And then, so what we did, the framework plan kind of did, as you can see, I passed around the AT&T PJA framework plan. We did kind of did a short description of the area, a little bit of mapping. We did a SWOT analysis looking at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and we came up with 3 different land use scenarios. The idea here was that we're giving the town a range of options to look at and consider based on the market data and local priorities. The first scenario was always what existing zoning would allow, just as a basis for the other recommendations, and the other 2 were variations on land use recommendations, either based on market data or what the land could support. And then we did a multimodal mobility assessment, so we looked at transportation recommendations, we looked at traffic, like and ped type of improvements, those types of greenways and those types of things that made sense on the site, and then we mapped those. So in phase 3, these are the 17 areas that we looked at. It was a very extensive effort, so you could see that we looked at 12 of our priority growth investment areas and 5 of our local priority areas. So in the Somerset Hills, this is one of the focus areas. So we looked at the AT&T site, we looked at Far Hills Village Center, Burnsville Town Center, Exit 33 of I-78 in Warren, and the Watchung Village Center. So with AT&T, I'm sorry for the colors, it looks a lot better on computer screen, and I'll send a copy of this presentation so you guys can have that afterwards to go through it, and with links to some of it. So you can see we kind of looked at the area, you can see the existing land uses that we mapped, if the towns had a complete streets policy or not. So as I said, we came up with 3 scenarios for each site. So the existing zoning on the AT&T campus, it could allow a little bit additional growth there. So we kind of looked at what the ultimate build out of that site would be. And then we came up with 2 other scenarios for that site. So really the scenarios were mixed use, concepts and just with different densities for scenario 2 and scenario 3. The idea was trying to make it a little bit more center-like. It's never going to be a true downtown, but make it more mixed use, to have a mix of like a hotel use, some residential, some retail. So it's more self-supporting, and then can also be integrated onto the 206 corridor. So and this third scenario was that with just a different mix of uses and a little bit more intense. So these ideas, if you see the amount of development, these are just kind of for more scale and discussion, not absolutes that it has to be 350 units of housing or 600,000 square feet of that. It's just kind of giving an idea of the different mixes of uses, and really this is meant to be a starting point for the town to consider during a master plan re-examination, zoning changes, and give a starting point for those discussions and kind of help the town give a little bit more information to make a more informed decision and be a resource and not necessarily an edict from the county that this is what has to occur. So that was with the AT&T site in Bedminster Village. We kind of looked at the area along Main Street and then the Malincront and Advanced properties and how those could be additional redevelopment opportunities or development opportunities there. The idea was improving Lamington Road to make more of a Main Street corridor, but make sure there's sidewalks, pedestrian improvements along that corridor. And then we looked at some mixed-use scenarios for the Advanced property, the Forbes property in that area. Kind of make it with the reuse of the office buildings for Malincront, trying to make that more of a village center, some more activity, so it supports that mixed-use 24/7 type of concept that the employers are looking for attracting the talent and have you don't want to, we heard from our real estate people, the companies are looking for mixed-use, vibrant areas. So having a mixture of uses, having some on-site retail or some on-site restaurant type of uses, make those, and with some residential uses, make them more lively and more attractive places for the workforce, which wants to be in those types of places.
And Walter, just a clarification, when is it? Can everybody hear in the back? No. I just want to make sure.
Joe's in the front.
Joe's in the front.
They still can't hear.
But the other thing is, you mentioned some properties. I think most people know Malincront, where it's moving in.
Mm-hmm.
Most people know about AT&T. There's probably not a lot of labels for Forbes and Advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And Forbes property it's commonly known as that, but it's not owned by Forbes anymore.
Correct.
So if you could just kind of explain that so everybody knows what area you're talking about.
It's basically across from where Malincront has moved in, that property. I forget the name of the property now. The form was.
It's the triangle.
It's a triangular piece between Somerville Road and 206 and Lamington.
206 and Lamington.
Correct.
Just so everybody kind of has an idea of what
Right.
you're talking about. No, a lot of people do, but there's
Okay.
some people in the audience.
Sure.
And also just to point out, the reference to Lamington Road, a lot of people would consider that an extension of Main Street, but it really is Lamington Road. It's the section of Lamington Road that is east of 206.
And could I ask one other question? I don't understand what you mean by AT&T, because I thought that land was AT&T's, and how are we going to develop someone else's land?
Well, let me jump in. Part of the impetus behind this goes back to the big picture on master plan review. AT&T is there. It will continue to be there as long as AT&T wishes to be there.
Right.
One of the concerns that some of us have within the municipality is might there be a day that they decide to move someplace else? And the municipality, the goal is for the town not to be left holding the bag on our biggest property taxpayer. They leave town, and all of a sudden we have an enormous void in our ratables.
Okay.
So this what Walter's doing is they're trying to figure out what could be possible. And I know we've mentioned it at reorganization meetings that we want to relook at our master plan with emphasis to the commercial corridor. We want to see what the town will live with and what they would either like or not be opposed to in our commercial corridor. Master plan review is a part of that, and this is a part of that tonight. So he's kind of considering what's possible.
Okay,
So
so
that's the reason for this.
Correct. And the township should be commended for being proactive and looking at these sites now before anything happens. So you have a plan in place for if AT&T decides to relocate and move out of the area, which I hope they don't, but it's just having Plan B kind of ready to go, and start having these discussions so you can make the decision of how to move forward in the future if that does happen. So with that area between Somerville 202, 206, and Lamington Main Street, the idea was kind of looking at the existing zoning could allow a little bit more development in those areas, and the other two scenarios that are outlined in the framework plan talk about mixed use concept with different mixtures of retail and residential uses on those sites, kind of making the site more attractive, and for Malincront to have additional uses in that area and be able to walk to. So one of the multimodal transportation recommendations was potentially transforming the section of 206 into more of a boulevard. So instead of having a high-speed road, a little bit slower, and making it easier for pedestrians to cross, especially on the Main Street corridor, to access the library and some of the parks on the other side to the west of 206. So we made a whole series of recommendations on pedestrian improvements in those areas, and basically connections to the township's existing an extensive trail network and sidewalk network that they have, and how to make those other connections. So kind of hard to see, but you can see that we made a series of recommendations on some new multimodal trails for the area, trying to connect the AT&T campus better to the surrounding areas, because it's very limited for vehicular access, but there might be some additional ways of getting access to that campus if it redeveloped in the future with different set of uses. And as I said, the really big concept was that the boulevard treatment for 206, and potentially transforming that into more of a slower speed gateway for Bedminster instead of the high speed, how it operates right now. So we also looked at Far Hills, and then some of the recommendations kind of off each other. So we looked at the village center. Obviously, we looked at a much smaller area, and since this is a local priority area, there was desire for very much small scale interventions. So with that, we kind of just looked at tweaking some of the existing zoning, allowing a little bit greater residential uses in the village itself. And then a lot of it, which ties together with the Bedminster recommendations, focused on placemaking and connections and walkability and bicycle connections. So we came up with a series of recommendations kind of off the Bedminster connection, so tying that in onto 2, and some connections to the fairgrounds, and making the fairgrounds in Far Hills more accessible from the existing residential neighborhoods, making the connection to Bedminster, that as a potential use, for people to walk between the two communities, and then some other recommendations on some village-wide traffic circulation recommendations, looking at some one-way streets and those types of things to kind of address some of the traffic flows in those areas. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of the recommendations that came out of the Phase 3 study for this area. And the idea is this is really meant to be a starting point for the township for future discussions on master planning, zoning changes, and just some of the success stories from this. The investment frameworks kind of have a consensus vision for where growth and preservation should occur in the county. It's provided local decision makers more resources to help inform their decision-making process, strengthen the linkages between the county's master planning projects and programs and plans with the local plans. And then it's led to several master plan reviews and zoning revisions from the previous phases of the study. As I mentioned, we made a series of recommendations very similar to the AT&T campus for the former Santa Fe Aventus site in Bridgewater when Santa Fe left. So basically the developer and the township took our recommendations and built upon them, and is implementing a mixed-use concept on that site, very similar to what the initial county concept was. So we have confidence that our recommendations are valid and really actionable and implementable, and not pie in the sky planning aspirations of things that won't happen. Some of the other towns have implemented some of the zoning changes that we recommended in the previous phases as well, or further studied them through their planning process and master plan updates. It's leveraged additional grant resources. So one of the recommendations in the Access and Mobility Study, we looked at the Washington Avenue corridor in Greenbrook, and they want to take Washington Avenue and turn that section of Greenbrook into more of a downtown. It's never going to be a true downtown, but make it more walkable, bikeable, friendly for pedestrians and non-motorists. Having the plan that the county came up with, they were able to apply for and receive almost $800,000 in safety funding from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, which is the funding agency for the majority of this work, but that they are the conduit for federal transportation dollars for North Jersey. So we'll apply for a grant to actually implement the road diet, which took a 2-lane road in each direction and turned it into 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane, which improved safety, made it more easy to pull on the corridor and cross the corridor as a pedestrian. So that was implemented. And then we're looking for other funding and sources that we could take advantage of. And having these studies and these concepts opens up a lot of doors for federal funding and state funding as well. We have been in discussions with the Highlands Council. They're looking to give some funding to the county to advance the Highlands Plan. We've spoken about potentially getting funding if the towns, especially the towns of Far Hills, Bedminster, and Bernardsville, were interested in taking these concepts and turning them into true master plan amendments or zoning ordinances. They're willing to provide funding for that if there's interest from the community. So having this plan has already opened up that funding opportunity for that. And then this whole work the county's been doing for the last 5 or 6 years has won a lot of statewide awards. And I'm not doing that to brag about the county, but it was kind of showing that it's been recognized that this is good planning work. We've received awards from Plan Smart New Jersey, the American chapter of the New Jersey chapter of the American Planning Association. Jersey planning officials have all given various portions of this project awards. So we kind of view this as a model. This is unique. We're the only county really doing this type of work in the state. So we're kind of, this is part of the culture of collaboration that we have here, which makes Somerset County unique. So this is done working hand in hand with the municipalities. None of the recommendations that come out of these planning efforts are what the town wants. If there was recommendations that were not hired, they don't make it into the plan. This is the county trying to tell the towns what to do, is trying to give them the tools and resources to make better decisions or more informed decisions, and having the data to help back up their decisions. So it's really a model for the state, and it doesn't really occur many other places. So I threw a lot of information out to you in a very short amount of time. Be happy to answer anyone's questions.
Why don't we start with the public and see if they have any questions?
Sorry for having my back to it.
Anyone? No? No questions, huh? Go ahead, Lou.
Yeah.
I have a question. In your review, in your process of putting these plans together, how much did you involve the state of New Jersey in terms of the Route 206 corridor? Because it continuously gets busier and busier. And we're trying to create a community environment, and yet the traffic has just gotten worse and worse. So it seems to me that it would be very hard to implement some of these plans if, in fact, the state is not involved somehow.
We had a steering committee that helped guide this project, and had representations from NDOT, some involvement from NJ Transit, the Office of Planning Advocacy, as well as the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. So they reviewed all these recommendations, especially the problem statements, and the state, in theory, could have said, no, we don't want that, and it wouldn't have been included, but they didn't, dismiss any of these recommendations. So there's problem statements generated for the boulevard concept for 206. So hopefully that will get into the planning process. The state will look at it through its very long and arduous project development process, but it eventually it's in there. It will make it into that program, and that's the beauty of this. Since it's federally funded, that opens up doors for further implementation. Because as the NJTPA does not want to spend money on planning studies that are going to sit on the shelf, so the county has a track record of moving these from plans to implementation. So we already talked to them about getting additional grant funding to move these ideas forward closer to implementation.
So with your discussions, the state, they were not opposed to a boulevard situation in that area?
At least the representative that we had on the steering committee did not object to that. I think it's somewhat consistent with their complete streets policy, where they're trying to design roads for all users now, not just the automobile. So, I mean, the county has a complete streets policy. I believe Bedminster does as well. So, the state is really, to their credit, has been a leader in complete streets. So it's taking, it's like a battleship. It takes a long time to turn. But the state is really trying to be proactive, and is still a leader in the country for addressing complete streets and pedestrian and bicycle safety issues. So I think it has a chance to move forward to be implemented. How long it's going to take, I couldn't say, but it's in a planning document. So it's much harder for them to dismiss it when the federal MPO, that the federal dollars come through, is in one of their plans that they funded. So.
Okay.
Good question. Anybody else on the board?
Walter, I was just wondering if you could,
I have a couple.
I think you touched upon the different scenarios. Just for the folks who don't have the handouts, if you could just touch on those scenarios for each of the areas.
Sure.
Looked at AT&T, and then the Main Street corridor.
So
Bring up the map on the
yes.
screen.
So I mentioned that we just got the final approval from the NJTPA on all the text and everything for the report. So in the coming week or two, this will be posted on our website. We'll send copies to the township, at least a paper copy and several electronic copies of the report, so you can see the full report. And there's a whole series of technical memos too that get into the market analysis and some of the other travel and analysis, the multimodal assessments and such. So the first scenario for the AT&T campus, it really just what existing zoning would allow. So we talk about what's built there now. Basically across the site, including some retail, could be up to 1.4 million square feet. I think right now the existing development is about 900,000 square feet. So there's some additional development that could occur there as of right zoning right now. Scenario 2 is the mixed-use campus option, and that really looked at potential. Some of those buildings are older and may not be able to be reused on the AT&T campus. So the idea was there'd be roughly about 600,000 square feet of office space, 260,000 square feet of residential space, with roughly 260 units. A hotel of a 200-unit hotel, 200 units of multifamily housing, and about 130,000 square feet of retail space, kind of making that mixed-use node activity area more of a 24/7 type of place. It's very similar to the concepts that's moving forward on the Santa Fe campus. And then in scenario 3, it's just a little bit more intense. And these, like I said, are just kind of guides, not necessarily absolutes of what should go there. And scenario 3 was more of 900,000 square feet of office space, about 350 residential units, a slightly larger hotel, and close to 200,000 square feet of retail base. This kind of just gives you an idea of how the different intensities of the site could be, but the major concept is a mixed-use type of place that had a mixture of residential uses, retail, and office space on the area.
Just on that point, in your research, do you have any data on the demographics of the folks who are looking to live in a campus setting like that? My initial concern is obviously taxing the school and bringing families and more students to schools, or this is still a problem. So, do we which demographic are we looking at?
We didn't really do that kind of analysis, but the previous studies we looked at, there is definitely a demand for multifamily housing in the county that far outstrips the demand for single-family housing. And typically, one of the issues is workforce housing, having not necessarily affordable housing, but a housing that's affordable to people that are making 80 to 120% of the median income. And that's really the entry-level workers in these office, the millennial type of generation, those types of people that can't necessarily afford to buy a single-family home now, but want a multifamily type of rental unit. And then typically those types of projects don't generate a lot of school children. They're more, when they want to have children, a lot of the data is showing that they'll tend to buy in the community. So it's keeping the workforce here, providing the workforce for the employment, because if the talent isn't here, then AT&T would definitely move. And, you know, that's kind of the concept that we're looking at, is providing a range of housing types to make sure we can and retain the workforce in this area, because I think that's the strength of the county, is our very educated and talented workforce that makes the companies want to stay and relocate and expand in the county.
And Walter, just to interject, and when Mallinckrodt came in a year ago, or I guess just about a year ago, they met with us. After they announced that they were going to move into Bedminster, we had a meeting with them, a subcommittee had a meeting with them, and asked them, okay, well, we're happy you're here, but why Bedminster? Why this part of Somerset County? And that was the exact reason they gave. They didn't talk about tax incentives or highways. They said, we're going to be hiring high-level executive category of employees, and this is a place where we know we can attract them. They weren't there. Mallinckrodt's moving in, but the majority of the folks that will be moving into that building will be new hires, not folks moving from St. Louis or another site. So the population here was a huge attraction for them.
We've heard that with other corporations that have located throughout Somerset County, the H.E. Sanico and Burns, Lindy Gas and Bridgewater, those because of the talent that we have here, because of our strength in telecommunications and pharmaceutical, we have a very educated workforce, and making sure that this area remains attractive to our existing talent and future talent, because as everyone knows, there's a lot of articles about the millennials moving out, going to college out of state and not coming back. By providing this range of housing types in these more mixed-use 24/7 activity areas, it's attractive for them to come back to New Jersey. If we don't provide those opportunities, then we're going to lose the talent and the investment that a town like Bedminster has made in the excellent schools that you have, educating your children, and then there's no opportunities for them to come back. So we see that throughout the county is an issue. So really maintaining our workforce and attracting talent is key to being successful.
Rich, you have a few
Yeah, I had a
questions?
couple questions. First one, do you see Bedminster as the same kind of town as the other 20 municipalities in the county?
It has some similarities, but it's very unique that you have the extensive greenway network. You have a lot of recreation and opportunities that some of the other towns don't have, with the extensive trail system, and you're preserved. A lot of preserved land and open space, and it's a different type of character place than than something like Bridgewater or Somerville. So that uniqueness makes it an attractive place for people wanting to come here or stay here or invest here.
So is there anything wrong with the town? What problems have you identified that you talk about relaxing the zoning or changing the zoning on the triangle? Are there any problems that would solve?
Well, it's just creating those opportunities for creating those environments, creating those mixed-use, vibrant areas where investment, where the market is looking to invest and businesses are looking to locate, because that's what they feel the talent wants. So it's kind of making sure that it can remain economically competitive and stable, and diversify the tax base and those types of issues, to ensure that you don't have Mallinckrodt decided to move out because it's not a good place, or their employees want to come here. That's what some of the strategies that we're looking at to try to make it attractive and for action as well as retention of employment opportunities.
George, I can help you with that.
Sorry, I just have one more question. Sure. Did you look at it sounds like you looked at a lot of positive things. What about a list of all the negative impacts? Have you looked at that?
Not per se of obviously, there would have to, these are just the initial recommendations. There would have to be you'd have to do much more detailed analysis, see what the traffic impacts would be. So like I said, these are kind of the starting point for discussions, not the ultimate recommendation should would occur. You could do the same type of concepts at a much lower density if that's what the township desires. This isn't by any chance an edict from the county saying this is the only two scenarios that you have. You could do 5 different machinations of these types of the mixture of uses, but the idea was the overall concept is the mixed use having some residential, some retail, some office, commercial type of space.
And for the residents of Bedminster, do you think it makes sense to consider all the negative impacts as part of the study?
Of course, I want to make sure you know, Bedminster is a unique and successful place. You don't want to do anything that's going to detract from that. It's kind of looking at heading off potential problems and having a plan in place if AT&T decided to move out, and we'd be better shape than what Bridgewater was. This is a knock on Bridgewater, but when Sanofi moved out, they weren't sure how they're going to reuse the site. And made some very good decisions on allowing multiple tenants in there as an initial step. And then the county study, we worked with them and gave them some ideas that they expanded upon and implemented as a redevelopment plan. So we're really trying to just give the town some resources and tools to help inform your decision making.
Okay, thank you.
George, just to answer one of your questions, and I think your second question is extremely important and incisive. What is the problem that we are trying to solve? And I will tell you, if you look up and down Route 206, you'll see a lot of businesses and a lot of offices that are leased. They're spaced for lease.
Yeah.
I've been on the township committee. I think this is my 8th year. And every year during our budget cycle, every year, the portion of the amount to be paid by taxes, the proportion has been greater amongst the individual property owners compared to the commercial property owners. Our residents are paying a bigger portion of the property tax pie every year. Our goal is to try to reverse that, or at least stabilize that, so that we're not changing the character of Bedminster. And in fact, this investigation is part of a multi-pronged attack. If you look and see what's been going on in the western part of Bedminster, USET, the Essex horse trials, there's been a huge effort out to kind of put Bedminster back on the equestrian map. And the goal of that is to keep the western part of Bedminster and those large estates, those large and valuable estates. That also will keep those property values up. So this is the bigger picture here is to make sure that the commercial economic part of our municipality is healthy and vibrant, make sure that our open space is able to remain open space and also healthy and vibrant. So in the big picture, that's kind of what this is all about. And that's the fix, that's the problem we're trying to address. And this isn't the complete solution. This is, here's some options, and we need to have a healthy discussion. And I think your questions are right on.
And just to put it into some sort of chronological assessment, when we first started discussions, Walter, is probably about 2+ years ago, maybe at this point?
2 years, and then really a year over the last year, we've really been working with the township.
So it was 2 years ago, and that actually predates the organization of the Master Plan Subcommittee, and which, by the way, the 3 members are here: Mayor Holtaway, Committeeman Colin Hickey, and Tim Walter back there. So the Master Plan Committee.
And Jason, don't forget Jason.
And I'm sorry, Jason Andrus as well. Sorry, Jason. So the 4 members are here, and they've been to look at Bedminster zoning currently and make recommendations to the Land Use Board, and then ultimately, obviously, the Land Use Board to make final recommendations on the revisions to the master plan. This was run in parallel, independent, that Mayor give the county that independent.
There you go.
There you go.
It was you,
Some
after all.
independence with just a little bit of guidance from the township on the current uses, the current economic issues, the tax issues, the rateable issues, the population, the school issues, incentives that the township is trying to promote, such as equestrian uses and enhanced open space and trail network, right? So certainly Walter was apprised of all the efforts we're doing in town, but we did want to give the county some leeway when they were working with their own experts in looking at the AT&T property, looking at the Main Street corridor, looking at the 202-206 triangle, so that we could then hopefully at some point, like tonight, bring the Land Use Board, the Master Plan Committee, and Walter's presentation and see what sticks, right? I mean, Bob is going to work with the Master Plan Subcommittee. Some of this, they may say this is great, we can work with this. Some of it he may say we don't like it at all. And in the end, it comes right back to the Land Use Board to make that final determination.
Yeah, part of,
Hope that
And I
puts back
think,
into perspective.
and I think, and really examining the negative potentials is also very important. So George, I think you brought up a great perspective on it.
part of my goal was bringing these outside resources in. We had a very good consultant team that was a land use planning firm, a transportation planning firm, an economic development market analysis firm that all looked at this. And the idea is, my goal as director was bringing additional resources to the town so you could do this what-if planning, not spending your own funds, by having the county bring these resources and allow you to do this what-if scenario planning. If you use it, great. I mean, I'm more than happy to implement this, but if you don't, that's okay too. It was really a toolbox for the town to use for making a decision on where the town would like to go in the future.
Okay,
That can be
so
very
Walter, you did cover the focus area 1, the AT&T campus. If you can
Yes,
just
I can go on
the
to-
scenarios for focus area 2.
Should I attempt to put this back on?
I think it's still on.
With the other site, the triangle, we looked at what the existing zoning would allow, and it's a mix of some lab space and some additional office space on that site. And then in scenarios 2 and 3, we looked at mixed-use scenarios for that. So with those sites, it was really just a difference of the amount of residential versus the amount of retail and office space. So in scenario 3, for that site, scenario 3, we looked at about 106,000 square feet of residential space, 88,000 square feet of office space, and about 21,000 square feet of retail space. So that was approximately about 80 units of residential, 80 residential units in that scenario. And then the other scenario was about the same, but a little bit less residential, 87,000 square feet of residential space, about 50,000 square feet of office, and 125 of retail. So can I just give you an example of one that's a little bit more heavy on the residential, one's a little bit more heavy on the retail, non-residential space. So that's kind of just the concepts, and that would complement the office space that's across the street and then tie into the village itself.
Is that scenario focused on the advanced property primarily?
Primarily that, yeah. We really, with the Malincront, that pretty much set, so we didn't really look at that. But there is similar opportunities on there if that site would like to be examined. That you could probably do something similar there, maybe just on a little bit smaller scale, with some varied retail or other type of convenience uses to make, some restaurants, some other service type of commercial on that site to make it a little bit more mixed use as an amenity for that office use that's there.
The smaller commercial properties in that zone, in that area, do you have any recommendations for those?
No, we really just kind of focused on the triangle, because that's what, our initial feedback from the town was to kind of look at that area, since there were some proposals and some, so give it a fresh look for the township to consider what should potentially happen there.
As part of transportation, did you include any discussions with NJDOT for better bus lines, better train service?
Well, that was actually, I mentioned, one of the weaknesses that we found was the lack of transit service.
Right.
The township is the county's service is really the only, that comes up to the Hill Shopping Center, is really the only transit service in the area.
Right.
NJ Transit is not really looking right now, as we're focusing on the existing system and enhancing that versus adding additional service. So we would hope that with some of this mixed use opportunities, that would make it more attractive for serving it by putting some more potential riders in the seats of the buses. But we didn't really focus on that. But I think there's opportunities for some sort of shuttle service
that could circulate around these areas, and that is more, as some additional development occurs, that might help support that. But we're really looking at the bike and pedestrian connections to look at as an alternative mobility strategy versus transit service at this point.
But also biking perhaps to the train station?
Correct.
Or
So
to
that's
the-
why that's why I mentioned both the improvements for Far Hills as well as Bedminster, because they're really tied together. So
Right.
really what we did is overall with this study is any of the recommendations, we wanted to make sure we weren't pitting one priority growth investment area against another one. So we tried to step back in our recommendations and look at the regional picture, because we didn't want all these recommendations to focus, let's say, on hotel uses and mixed use for all the sites, because then
Too many hotels.
too many hotels and the towns are fighting and competing against each other for investment. So we want to make sure the investments that we were trying to encourage complement versus detract from the other communities.
Is there anyone else in the public? Yes, go ahead. This lady's been patiently waiting.
Come forward. so
Yes,
we get
come forward, huh?
On the microphone. Your name and your address and your question,
I thought I was allowed comments.
You are,
or comment.
or a comment.
Good, how are you? Cheryl Roden, Bedminster Township. So I don't disagree with Mayor Parker. Tax bills have been going up, and I agree that we need to work together in a cooperative fashion to find the right solution that works. However, when I look around almost the entire state of New Jersey, if not the United States, when we talk about adding more retail space, it scares the hell out of me. We have so much retail vacancy already. We have malls being converted to care centers, to medical offices. Why are we going to add more retail space? Makes no sense to me. When we talk about adding offices, to Mayor Parker's point, we already have office vacancies here. So I hear you. Let's build a campus-like setting. Let's put a little bit of everything in there. Okay, great. But let's do it with some real thought. We have the hills. How long did it take us, let us remember, to get a light at Schley Mountain Road? We had to have significant accidents happen. So if you're talking about a boulevard on Route 206, that's a great idea. If you don't have a commitment from DOT, do not do this plan, because we'll be killing people on that road. I'm sorry, this is the reality of the DOT. We couldn't get 25 miles an hour at school zone on Somerville Road with 700 kids in a school. How does that work? We cannot do this unless there is DOT commitment to change the character of traffic in this township. Why are you going to add more multi-use, multi-unit housing when it takes me 15 minutes to get off 287 from the south if I'm coming home at rush hour? If you cannot figure out traffic, you cannot add more people. That is the bottom line. And the other thing about multi-unit dwellings, if I hear it one more time, I will scream. When people tell me, we want to move to Bedminster, we want to move to Somerset Hills because the schools are great, oh, but we're going to build this housing and there will be no children. Are you kidding me? We need to be realistic about these planning efforts. We need to look at the multi-unit housing that we have. We need to understand the problems that exist in those neighborhoods. There is not enough parking. There is not enough sidewalks. You got to figure it out if you're going to do a plan that will work for the people who are here and the people who will buy in because they think we figured this out. So that's what I have.
Thank you.
Yeah. Colin. Please. Yeah, no, come, yeah, please.
Colin Hickey, 3 Desiree Court. I just had a question about traffic, and I think it dovetails with Lou's comment. Right now, we have, with the office space in particular, pretty much a arrive at 9, leave at 5 distribution. And as you've mentioned, a 24/7 kind of usage scenario. In other examples where you've implemented these plans, how does that drive traffic volume in terms of the uplift? Because now you have coming and going constantly as opposed to just kind of two peaks, one at the start of the day, one at the end of the day.
A lot of the places, it lessens the peak hour, and it kind of spreads traffic throughout the day. It doesn't mean there's rush hour traffic throughout the day, but it kind of, it decreases the peak hour trips because some of it's self-contained, especially if people have to be living and working in that same place, and that, but also it minimizes some of the trips if you have that mixture of uses with residential and some retail in the office space, that people stay on campus and have dinner there, and then instead of going down the road to have dinner, so to speak. So it kind of internally captures some of the trips, so it doesn't necessarily generate as much peak hour traffic, and then it spreads it out a little bit more during the day.
And in that case, then, how much is in campus versus people coming off the campus to go access a campus? You know what I'm saying? How much on-site versus how much comes from a different
It depends
destination?
on the mixture of uses, really, and the amount of space. It's hard to give a definitive answer one way or another, but there are a lot of studies that show that having a mixture of uses will decrease like the peak hour trips and spread the traffic out throughout the course of the day. Not necessarily into the middle of the night, but just.
Well, I was going to, because you're talking 24/7, so that's the other.
It's more the idea of the 24/7 is having, that the place doesn't start at 9 and end at 5, and there's some activities on the other, in the evening, it doesn't become a ghost town, so to speak, of a corporate campus, with that mixture of uses.
Anyone else from the public? Seeing none? Board? No? Anyone? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming out, Walter. Thanks, Walter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone have anything else further that they need to talk about tonight? Comments or?
I'd like to invite Tim Walter up to talk about what's coming up in a little bit.
This wasn't planned, but we're having a great event on September 22nd. These guys all they talk about. We are having Moth Night. So Jay, write this down in your paper, okay? So it's going to be on September 22nd from 7:30 till 10 o'clock. It's going to be on a Friday evening. We have a speaker coming in that's very well known, moth expert. So I didn't know there were so many species of moths, and so he's going to give a little talk. It's going to be at River Road Park. We have a little banner out there. So it's going to start at 7:30. He's going to do about an hour talk, and then he's going to set up a screen. I think it's going to be just a large sheet with a light. It's going to attract all the moths. He's going to put a little bead around, because I think that attracts the people. No, it attracts the moths. And it's going to be a neat little event. So I hope everyone can attend.
Right.
September
22nd, 7:30. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I guess we're finished.
Yeah.
Motion to close?
So moved.
Second.